paper that I have written, although what I will be talking about is rather different from the paper, but the paper is published in International Econometric Review. This is a journal published in Turkey by actually my student Sidika Başçı, who is the wife of Erdem Başçı, former governor of State Bank of Turkey. And this journal, so if you want to look at the ideas in detail, that is the place. It's in, I think, in the most recent issue, but the paper. So, but I will be talking you see, one of the things that students must learn if you are to be an intellectual, and everybody who's at this level of education must learn to be an intellectual, is not just the ideas, but the meta ideas, the thinking about thinking. So here is the syllabus. Econometrics is being taught, macro is taught. But what is this macro? Where did it come from? Who started it? What was the purpose of it? What was the context in which it was developed? And how useful has it been to mankind? So these are the big questions that you need to ask before. So these are the meta questions. One is the question, okay, macro, we study the ISLM curve, and this is how you derive it. Okay, so that's the substance. But who invented the ISLM curve? Why did they do it? How has it been used in the world? And what have been the effects of using this model? So these are the meta questions, the going outside the subject to look at the bigger picture. And those are questions which are rarely asked. So that's what I'm going to try to do with respect to economics. So now I'm going to share my screen to cover the slides. All right, so this is the macro for 21st century. All right, so let me start by saying that economics is broken. The discipline that we are studying, all of us, and not, well, actually, I think I was thinking that the audience will be economists, but especially macroeconomics, but I think it's more general. But anyhow, this applies to social sciences as well, but I was especially focusing on economics. So basically, the micro theories that you are studying, and not you are, but actually are being taught all around the world, are just completely wrong. Similarly for the macro theories, and similarly for the econometrics. They are so deeply flawed that it is not even possible to repair them. You must just throw them out and start from new foundations. This is a very strange thing that I'm saying, because I'm saying lots and lots of textbooks can just be thrown into the garbage because they're not actually helpful. They're actually teaching wrong theories which are harmful. So, of course, this is in some sense sad news that we have spent a lot of time studying and trying to understand theories which are false and wrong and harmful. But it is also at the same time very good news that it gives us a golden opportunity to rebuild the discipline on new foundations. But doing this requires thinking along different lines from what is taught in conventional courses. So first, so these are some very strong claims. So I will provide a little bit of evidence. If you want more details, all of these points are written up in much greater detail in my blogs, which I will refer you to study the blog posts which describe them. And then most of the blog posts contain references to published articles which provide much more detailed explanation of the points that I'm making. So when the global financial crisis occurred in 2007, it became clear to everybody that economists don't know what's going on in the world. Nobody had foreseen that this would happen. In fact, the Queen of England went to the London School of Economics and said, "Why did no one see this coming?" So they were all very embarrassed. So after this, a lot of Nobel laureates, I have a whole list of quotes from very major economists saying that there is some very big problems with the theory. I think Krugman said that the profession as a whole went astray. So, uh, so there is empirical data. There are people who are saying this. There are books written about how, not one, many books which explain why economics is a pseudoscience, not really a true science in the sense of the word. And I have written papers on empirical evidence against utility theory, in which I show that this utility maximization, which is at the heart of micro theory, is all wrong. Similarly, in the theory of the firm, you have profit maximization, and this has been proven empirically to be false. Firms do not maximize profits. The supply and demand theory for determination of prices, this theory is also wrong. That is not how prices are determined in the market. In fact, any major concept, price elasticity, monopoly, oligopoly theory, all of these are just don't work in the real world. Why you never found out? Because if you look at the text, they never compare the theory to the reality. If you ever compare them, you will find that it is wrong. So the economic textbooks simply don't compare. They just provide you with theory and theory and theory, with no discussion of how this theory really works in the real world, except for some artificial examples which make it seem like the theory works. So then the question arises. So I'm not going to, there is a huge amount of literature on the evidence for why, what is wrong with economics. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just take that for granted. And I'm going to go to the meta question. Okay, so economics is all wrong, but how can this be? How did this happen? I mean, in the same places that you are studying economics, you are studying uh, uh, physics and astronomy and medical sciences and and engineering, and all of these have made tremendous progress. So why is it that and it seems very strange that on the one hand you're building supercomputers with this kind of knowledge, and at the other hand I'm saying that economics is just all wrong, all garbage. So it seems very strange. How can the same minds which think such great thoughts also make such big blunders and mistakes? Well, you have to understand that there is the knowledge of the outside world, the external reality. That doesn't require thinking about the human being, what is inside our hearts and what is inside our souls, and how we think and what we feel. These things are not part of the external reality. And so West has made tremendous progress in terms of understanding what is out there in the world, but they have gone backwards in terms of understanding what is inside us in our hearts. Now, economic theory and all of the social sciences deal with the human reality, who I am, what do I live for, what is the goal of my life, all of these things. This is not something you can learn by studying rocks and mountains and molecules and engineering. To learn who I am, what is the purpose of my life, how can I develop good character, and all of these things. How can I make advancement, make spiritual progress? These are not questions to which you will find answers in textbooks about the external world. So, okay, so there is two realms of knowledge, the realm of the outside reality and the realm of what is inside man. So what I'm saying is that in the West, there has been tremendous progress in learning about the external reality, and similarly, backward progress in terms of understanding the internal reality of our lives. So how did this happen? Well, Again, this is a question on which many books have been written. I think one of the most important ones is The Great Transformation by Karl Polanyi, but there are many others also which you need to understand. But I will not, again, this is not my topic for this talk, so I will just go briefly over this. Basically, the society and traditional societies all over the world, people lived for the sake of the society. And there was social responsibility and many traditional values. These were all thrown out in the transition to the capitalist society, in which the key feature is that the market rules everything and everything is for sale. So human beings, our lives are for sale in the labor market. The land, which is actually the planet Earth, which supports us, and we are in a symbiotic relationship. We sustain the land and the land sustains our lives. This also became a commodity for sale, and that is actually the reason for the environmental catastrophe that we see, that we, instead of understanding that all of the ecology is tied together, the animals and the trees and the uh, clouds and the oceans, these are all part of the environment we live in. We've made them objects for sale, and then we tried to maximize our profits from selling these things, and we did not worry about the future, what will happen to our coming generations. So this was because economic theory doesn't teach us to worry about what will happen to the next generation after us. It only says that you should just maximize your own utility. So how did this happen? That's a long story. But one of the important aspects of this story is that in this change, uh, everything was re-engineered. The politics, the social structure, the philosophy, and the most important thing, the one that is at the heart of everything, is the purpose of life. See, when the transformation occurred, uh, the uh, transition was made to secular society where there was rejection of God and afterlife. And so basically, the purpose of life became to maximize pleasure in this world and not worry about what happens after death. And because the West has been very powerful and the Western education system has spread all over the world, so all of these poisonous philosophies have entered our minds and hearts as well, even though these are directly in conflict with teachings of Islam. So how did this transformation to secular modernity take place? Again, there are many books which trace this. One of the best is the Tawny's book on, I've forgotten the title. Anyway, you will find a link to it. So very briefly, in Europe, there was the church enjoyed a lot of power and prestige, and because of that, they went astray. Power corrupts, and the popes and the senior clergy started to having wild parties and openly indulging in sin, and this led to the Protestant revolt against the Catholic Church, and then there was huge number of bloody and violent battles between the Protestants and the Catholics, and this made the public disenchanted with religion. They said that, this religion, it only leads to fighting, so let's get rid of it. And so also, so they said, okay, let's, instead of saying, previously there was the idea that the state should be run along religious lines, but seeing that this was always causing warfare, they said, okay, let's build the political science on secular grounds, on simply rational grounds which everybody can agree without talking about religion. So this led to this was the first step in the construction of an apparently objective social science. So currently what we are taught is that social science is objective. It's a concrete reality, just like physical science. Physical science is study of the world around us, And that is objective. How electron behaves, it doesn't have any feelings. But when you talk about social science, how we behave, how we should behave, how should we construct society, this is not objective. But uh, because in Europe they had rejected religion, they said that everything must be objective. So they were forced to present social science as an objective fact when it is not. So this is the great deception that we have to understand, that the word science which is attached to social science is wrong. There is no science in social science. It's just, you see, social science is a study of history, what happened to societies and nations. So they took European history and they generalized this to the whole world. So a lot of lessons of the social science are derived from what happened in Europe in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. And these lessons don't apply to the rest of the world, but they were forced to apply. They were, because they were supposed to be objective. So some of the key questions which are answered by religion were turned over to social science and then given wrong answers. So the most important question that we all of us face is, what is the goal of our life? And then subordinate questions are, how should we live? How should we behave as individuals, as families, as communities, as societies, as nations? These are all questions which are supposed to be answered by social science. Now, in the the European intellectual tradition, they said that, okay, since when we engage the heart and the soul, we start fighting each other because of religion. So let's leave the heart and soul out of the picture and use only the aql, the reason. So unfortunately, all of these questions require the engagement of the heart. And so the answers that they come up with were wrong. Basically, and not only were they wrong, they were very, very seriously wrong and very, very obviously wrong. So again, there is a problem, an issue. Why did these people who are so smart, they can build rockets and go to the moon, how can they make such huge blunders? So you have to understand that this loss of faith in God led to a deep trauma. I could give lots and lots of quotes from lots and lots of philosophers showing how the tragedy of loss of faith, there is no God, there is no justice, there is no afterlife. If somebody was very cruel, no one will punish him for this. This is a very serious, trauma. It's a tragedy, and there is no meaning to life. Life is just whatever happens. So this is the consequence of rejecting God. And so one of the philosophers, Albert Camus, says that suicide is the only serious philosophical question. And there are many others who have come to similar conclusions, that if life is completely meaningless, then should we continue living? If you look at 19th century philosophers, major philosophers in Europe, nearly all of them had nervous breakdown of some type or the other. So this rejection of faith in Europe had very serious consequences on the shape of the intellectual discourse and the shape of the social sciences that occurred. In particular, knowledge itself was redefined. This is a very important thing to understand, and also very difficult to understand, because you see, if you look at what is being taught at MIT, Harvard, Stanford, etc., they are teaching only about the external world. Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, جَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. So this is that we have created for you the ears, the eyes, and the heart. And he says that the eyes are not blind, but the hearts become blind. So the heart is actually an instrument for acquiring knowledge. And the heart is a very powerful instrument for acquiring the knowledge, the ma'arifah, that is essential for us to understand the reality. Now, in the West, they said that no, we will not listen to the testimony of the heart, and we will not listen to the testimony of our soul. And this led to the extremely cruel world that we live in today, where Madeleine Albright can say that, yes, killing a million children in Iraq is worthwhile if we get the control of the oil. Now, no human being who has a heart and a soul can say that, but has become common way of thinking because of the nature of Western knowledge, which says that you should not pay any attention to your heart. If you think, the father of Western philosophy is Descartes, and he said, I think, therefore I am. Now, this is a very strange statement. And if I think about my own existence and I want to know, do I exist or do I not, then I will immediately sense the blood flowing in my veins. I will sense my heart beating. I will sense the tingling in my skin. All of these things are immediate. My thought process is a very remote thing. But they said, no, we will exclude everything that I feel, everything. And so then it becomes, if I exclude all of my bodily sensations, then it becomes difficult to know whether or not I am living, obviously. And then you have to find strange sorts of arguments and reasoning to come to this point. So these trends in European intellectual thought culminated in the 20th century in the philosophy of logical positivism, which emerged in the early 20th century. The Quran starts by saying that ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, that those who believe in the unseen, these are the people who will receive guidance. Now, logical positivism says that we must reject the unseen. So this is in direct contradiction and conflict, that logical positivism says that scientific knowledge is based only on what is observable, and we should not pay any attention to what is not observable. So, for example, in economics, there was the idea of utility, that is the pleasure in the heart that we get when we consume something. So he said, what's inside the heart we don't want to consider it, that's not scientific. So instead of preference, we should look at choice. If I give you an apple and orange, which do you choose? That's something I can see, that's observable. What's inside your heart, I cannot see, so it's rejected. So, unfortunately, basically in the real world, and this is really the key to everything that I will say, but I will not expand on this, and I have written a lot of papers on logical positivism and what it means and how it distorts all of social science. Here I will just say in a nutshell that the problem is that if you look only at the observables and don't look at what is behind, then you can never get to the truth. And that's really the problem at the heart of social sciences, heart of economic theory, heart of econometrics, that you're only looking at the numbers, not looking at what is behind the numbers. And you're not trained. In fact, you're trained not to look at what is behind, what is the hidden reality. That's what logical positivism teaches. And that's why all of the social sciences are flawed, because they don't look at the internal reality of our lives. When you walk into a classroom, your teacher doesn't ask you what you are feeling, where you have come from, what is your goal in life, why are you sitting in this classroom, why do you look sad. These questions are not part of our education, because what's inside, the human beings are all just robots according to the positivist behavioral theory. They consist of a set of behaviors and they can be programmed by stimulus and response. That was Skinner's theory. Skinner was a positivist. So all of these ideas in economic theory, human beings are just maximizers of utility. You can use a mathematical law to predict their behavior. That is so ridiculous, but it comes when you ignore the heart and the soul and you reduce the person to a calculating machine. So the effects of logical positivism on economic theory is that all individuals in all societies must behave in exactly the same way, according to the same formula. And that is what we study. We don't study that how consumers behave in Pakistan and how consumers behave in England and how consumers behave in Argentina. No, everybody is exactly the same. They all maximize pleasure, and their behavior is subject to mathematical formula. And what is rational behavior? Well, rationality means rejecting God and afterlife because there is no empirical evidence for this. So the only thing that you can do is maximize selfish pleasure in this dunya. Since economic theory says that everyone is an individual and all individuals are the same, there is no such thing as community, society, family. All of these things don't matter. And because we want to construct economic theory as a science, then we must ignore history, geography. We must build universal laws. The theory of supply and demand must work exactly the same in Argentina and in Africa and in Europe and in Australia, even though this is not really true. So, macroeconomics, you never study what happened in the Great Depression, what happened, how did the World War I affect the gold standard, what was the Bretton Woods Agreement, which created a new system of money. These things are not studied because the economic theory wants to be a science. If there is some particular event which happens, that's a historical event that happened at one point according to some reason. It's not science, because science is like the law of gravity. It doesn't depend on particular aspects of history and geography. So this is one of the major blunders made by founders of economic theory in the 20th century when they shifted to the positivist view, which comes from the scarcity principle. Previously, economists had understanding of history and geography and cultures and societies, and the older economists make mention of those. But in the 20th century, this disappeared from the subject. Finally, there is one more reason why economic theory is broken. Basically, in a secular society, the values of traditional society, which are cooperation, were changed to competition. The value of generosity, which is central to Islam, was changed to selfishness. And the idea of social responsibility, that we are all one family and we should care for each other and help each other, this was changed to freedom. Every individual is free. We can all pursue pleasure and we don't need to care for each other. My utility function does not contain anything about you. So this led to concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few people, and the rise of philosophies to justify this concentration. So the education that we receive is a way of keeping the system in place. Just think that if we took all the students and trained them in a different way of thinking, the entire society would change. So education has to reproduce the structures of power that exist in society. So economic theory is designed to justify, to preserve, to protect, to defend the existing economic system, which is highly unjust. One of the key insights of Karl Marx is that exploitation requires willing consent of the people who are being exploited, because the people, the wealthy and the powerful are very few people. Today, about 60 people, less than that, own half of the wealth of the world. So obviously, they cannot rule or control the world by power. So what needs to be done is that they have to use education to lead us to believe that we are living in a good world and this is a good system that we are following, and everything that is happening according to natural laws and reasonable theories. So economic theory is really a branch of moral philosophy. It justifies and defends the system. Now again, this is an idea which I have presented and detailed and defended elsewhere. Here I'm just going to give you one very, very simple and special example. So one of the key, and go on from here. One of the key elements in this defense is the idea that wage is the marginal product of labor and the interest rate is the marginal product of capital, or the return to capital. Now, actually, this theory only works for the Cobb-Douglas production function, which is a very special and unusual type of production function, doesn't actually hold in the real world. If you look at a constant, a fixed proportion function where you have to take 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital in order to produce 1 unit of output, then what is the marginal product of that 1 unit of labor? It is the entire output, because if you did not have the 1 unit of labor, you could not get the output. What is the marginal product of the capital? It is the same output. So if you cannot pay the entire output to both the labor and to the wage, so this means that you cannot justify the payment to capital as being what is naturally due to it, which is what you can do if you use a Cobb-Douglas function. So this very, very simple point is not taught in your textbooks because it goes against the structures of power, and the whole object of economic theory is to justify the earnings of the capitalists, who are actually rentiers. They make money without doing work. All of these things were clear to the early economists who understood these things, but they have been disappeared from the textbooks in the 20th century economics. So now we come to more technical matters. Economic theory as we study it today, as found in the textbooks, conventional textbooks, is based on 19th century physics. It was developed at that time. The maximization and equilibrium, these are the two things which are at the heart of economic theory. If you say what is the methodology of modern economics, it's maximization and equilibrium. These were the tools for Newtonian physics. There is an author called Mirovsky who has written about how economic theory was developed directly by copying physical theories of the time. Now, all of these theories have been superseded, and modern physicists do not use these tools anymore. But the modern economic theory was developed in an earlier time where mathematical capabilities were limited, and so these tools became widely used because you can do them on pencil and paper. You don't need a computer to calculate equilibrium and maxima for simple systems. So basically, economists started studying simple systems for which you can make calculations. And these are the things that are being taught, even though these things are so simple, I mean the formulas that are being used, that they do not apply to the real world, which is complex. And there was no option in the early 20th century because you could not study a complex system. You can write down what the complex system looks like, but you cannot do any calculations. So the only options were, in that time, to use things which you can calculate by hand. Today, the world has changed. The computer is there, and we can calculate very, very complicated answers to very, very complicated systems. But economists are still living in the 19th century, and they have not caught up to this current reality. So what are the changes that we need to make? So I'm saying that because economics is obsolete, it's a 19th century development, and it is wrong for many different reasons, only some of which I have listed. So we can change it, and this is our golden opportunity. We can do something entirely new, build on different foundations. Now the thing is that we don't have to start from scratch. That is, we don't have to start inventing new theories. There's a lot of theory which has been developed, but it has not become part of the mainstream economics. And there's lots of knowledge and information and research available which we can use to build new foundations. So the first place to start is the theory of human behavior. Now, the economic theory of human behavior has been solidly rejected. There is no evidence for any utility maximization anywhere. A lot of different fields of science have studied human behavior, and nobody has found maximization, and there is a reason for that we will discuss later. So behavioral economics is the simplest and the first team step outside of conventional theory. And if you look at the human behavior, you see that it is not maximization. But behavioral is very tame because basically try to stay as close as they can to conventional economic theory. So then there is Gerd Gigerenzer and his school, and they have started looking at heuristics of behavior. And these are more advanced studies. And but these are also not there. But all of these contain useful information for us to rebuild the theory. But one of the main problems is that, again, there is no heart and no soul in these theories. People are just thinking rationally. So if we go to Islamic theories, then we understand that the first place, if you want to study human behavior, you have to ask, what is the goal of life? Now, it doesn't have to be, for a Muslim, the goal of life is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to have success on the day of judgment. But even Muslims don't behave like this. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not that Islam says that everyone should be Muslim, then we can study their behavior. It just says, look at what the goal is. If your goal is to acquire piles of silver and women and horses, then this is how you will behave. If your goal is mixed, if you have nafsul ammara, then you will be under control of your soul. And nafs ammara is exactly utility maximization theory. So economic theory is the theory of nafs ammara. The next level up is nafs al-lawama. When you start thinking that, look, I'm eating all of these $100 meals and people are hungry. Shouldn't I be concerned about that? So now you are at the nafs al-lawama stage where you say that, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be enjoying luxury when my brother is hungry. So then then the behavior will be different. And then nafs mutmainna, that's a much more advanced stage. So basically, if you involve heart and soul and spirit, you get a much more complex and diverse theory of human behavior. And one of the key things that needs to be done is that change from outcomes to process. Consumer theory is based on what you get in the end, what you end up eating. But Islam says that it is how you earn, how you spend, all of these things, the process by which you do things, this matters a lot. And so it is not, basically outcome orientation is that winning only matters. And process orientation is how you play the game that matters. And it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. And so Islam is very much that, okay, you go to jihad, and whether you die, if you die, you are shaheed and successful. And if you succeed, then you are ghazi and you are also successful. So it is not the outcome which matters, it's the process. So this is a very different way of thinking about life from the outcome oriented that we have been taught. So from microeconomics, then you come to meso-economics, the intermediate state which is missing from economics. Then you go to macro. In meso-economics, you have social norms, and these are shaped by families and communities. And this is very important because our behavior is not utility maximization. How I behave depends on my family and how they train me, and also the community that I'm living in. I want to act in a way in which I will be acceptable to the community. I cannot act in ways in which everybody will hate me, and which will be make me appear bad in the eyes of my neighbors and friends, because man is very much driven by social relationships. Our happiness, our life depends very much on our friends and our families and our social circles. So, and it doesn't depend very much on how much I eat, whether I eat the best cake or whether I eat simple food, ekmek paneer. This is not going to have much effect on my pleasure. But economics says it's the only thing which matters is what you consume. And whether you have friends or enemies, this doesn't matter. So this is a very stupid way of thinking about life. So today, Hollywood is spreading poisonous norms all over the world. They're saying that the only thing matters is your own heart. I could give many, many examples of why the movies and how they spread very, very bad values about how the only thing you need to care about is your own self, and you don't need to care about anybody else. You don't need to care about your wife, your children, your family, your society. The only one it matters is you, yourself. So being selfish, being hedonist, these are the seeking pleasure, these are the values that are being spread. Interestingly, Turkey is fighting back. The movies now coming and TV series coming out of Turkey have much better Islamic values, and they portray people who are decent and who have good character and who are behave well towards others, and even yani, make sacrifice. So if you look at economics of family and community, the basic values are social responsibility. If somebody else is hungry, I should care about that and sacrifice that. I can, even if I have only little bit to eat, instead of eating it myself, I should give it to the other person. So all of these things are opposite of what economic theory teaches and opposite of what Hollywood teaches. But Alhamdulillah, in Turkey they are making good progress, and they are showing how people can sacrifice for the sake of others, and how we have social responsibility. And this is very important actually. I'm mentioning this not just because, but because these values are, because today the values of our youth are shaped by the Hollywood movies. So unless we can counterattack on that front, it will be very difficult for us to live according to Islamic values. So finally, we come to macroeconomics. So in macroeconomics, our conception is very different from conventional macro. So Allah Ta'ala says that we created you from a single pair, male, female, and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other. So it is not meant that we should fight each other, or that we should claim superiority for each other, that white is better than black, or red is better than black. Things like this are forbidden in Islam. We are all brothers and sisters. We are not enemies of each other. And there is no sense in one nation fighting another nation. That is prohibited according to the Islamic law. So we must learn to think macro at the level of the ummah, all of humanity, and look for welfare. So the conventional macro theory says that, okay, you have one nation, you have to defend your interests, you can have trade wars with other nations. So Islamic theory says, no, there is no trade war and no army war. Yani that is not moral, except in certain special circumstances. In general, we are thinking about the welfare of all of humankind, not of my nation against the other nation. And my nation, we don't want to improve the welfare in my nation at the expense of other, because we are all brothers and sisters. So this is a very different mindset and a very different way of thinking about the world from the one which we have been taught in the West. And this is in contrast with the idea that you can destroy the whole country of Iraq in order to control their oil, and you can destroy the entire country of Libya for political gain. So you can kill millions of people, and it doesn't matter, because if you make profit from that, then you should do that. So this is called profit maximization mentality, but it is not human mentality. And it comes only because you use only aql, and you don't have your heart, and you don't have your soul. So what is the way forward? How should we proceed? Well, one of the things that was removed from economics was history. There is a whole book called How Economics Forgot History. Now we have to put it back in. So when I teach macro, I say, okay, let's try to understand what happened in the 20th century. So I start my macro course with a discussion of the Great Depression. What happened in the Great Depression? How did it happen? What were the effects of this Great Depression? And even how Keynesian macroeconomics was constructed in response to the Great Depression. So then you understand macroeconomics, because you say, okay, there was this huge problem. Large numbers of people were unemployed. People were hungry. People were dying of starvation. There was massive social problems in USA and UK and Europe and generally over the globe. And so economic theory was created to understand why this problem occurred and how we can fix it. So once you start studying economic theory in its historical context, instead of thinking of it as a formula, which is a universal law, which holds in all countries at all times, which is not true in fact, then you start to understand both history and economic theory. If you want to study how money worked, I have some lectures on this. Then you can see how the gold standard emerged in the late 19th century and how it was finished off by World War I because the nations spent all of their gold in fighting the war. And so in the interwar period, there was no gold standard and monetary standard was different. And in fact, some people have argued that it is because of this that the World War II occurred. And then the Bretton Woods Agreement was made to create a system of global trade without gold. So the question of why the gold standard collapsed, how the current monetary system emerged, all of these are very historical questions, and you need to study history, but they are not taught in your conventional macro. Then there is the institutional theory, again, institutional economics. How does the world work? What does the central bank do? What do banks do? How do the stores work? How does trade work? So all of these are done by what is the World Trade Organization. Again, economic theory says that we have universal laws, so it's a science, so we don't want to study these things. So you lose a lot of important knowledge and information by not studying these things which matter a whole lot. Then we look at methods of social transformation. We look at the study, how societies change, how they develop, how does, what are ways that we can direct this transformation. So one of the biggest transformation that occurred in the whole world was when Islam came 1400 years ago, and an ignorant and backwards Bedouins were transformed into the leaders of the world. So how did this happen? What were the, can we pick up some clues from that? Well, of course. And how can we apply those lessons to create change today? Well, yes, of course. One of the keys is the unity. The Allah Ta'ala says that we have united your hearts, and if you spent all the treasure in the world, you could not unite the hearts of the people. So basically, the most valuable thing is the unity of the hearts. So how can we achieve this unity? Again, there are many things that can be done, but this is in very dark contrast to what economic theory says. In fact, it is famous that Thatcher said that there is no society, there's only individuals. Society is just a collection of individuals. This is the philosophy of methodological individualism, which is followed by economists. So the key to making an Islamic framework for the study of heart, soul, spiritual progress is to start by purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? Why am I here? What is the goal of my life? And certainly it is not to maximize pleasure and profits. And so these are the things that, these are the places where we can start rebuilding economic theory. Now, current economic theory does not look at these questions, and it is built on obsolete ideas about science and is based on obsolete mathematics of 19th century physics. In fact, society is a very complex system, and you cannot write down a formula which tells us what will happen tomorrow or how individuals will behave. And the maximization theory does not work because the future is unknown. Well, I want to maximize profits. Well, I need to know what the demand will be tomorrow, but I can't say because COVID crisis might occur tomorrow and the demand might change radically from anything that I can calculate. So instead of trying to maximize, and if you actually set up a maximization problem, you can't do it because it depends on how much capital I have, what the labor will be tomorrow, what the wages will be. Nothing is known. So when you do maximization, you're maximization in a vacuum. You're maximizing over things about which you have no information. So this is not actually how real people behave. Instead, they follow rules. So what are the rules? The rules depend on what you can see. Okay, I have this kind of things and I have this kind of product, and I think about the future and what it might be, and I follow pragmatic rules. So um, the maximization doesn't work, and also the equilibrium doesn't work. Also, physicists have moved beyond equilibrium. They know that in systems, in dynamical systems, they are not governed by the equilibria. They are governed by disequilibria. So there's currently, if you study dynamic systems, you find that physics no longer believes in equilibria. Things are not in equilibrium. Things are always changing. Equilibria was done because that was the easiest thing to compute. But now we can compute disequilibria. So physicists do that, and that's how dynamics is studied today. Equilibrium is 19th century. So basically the two fundamental tools, maximization and equilibria, are obsolete. And economic theory uses them because they want to do the calculations on paper and they don't want to use the computer. All right, so the one important tool for the future is the agent-based models. And so in these models, you can put in 1,000 different people or 100,000 and give each of them different behavior. You can put them all into families and communities and neighborhoods, and you can have heterogeneity. Different communities think and act in different ways. So if you do that, then and say, okay, here's my society. There are different groups of people. They have different tastes. They have different ideas. They have different ways of behavior. The economists will say, well, there's no way you can find out the answer to what will happen. Yes, it's true. You and I cannot compute it, but we can feed it all to the computer, and the computer will give us an answer in a minute. So this is the way to proceed. We have to learn, because today the computer allows us to do what was not possible yesterday. Today you look at the most complicated model in the most complicated textbooks, and these have only one agent in the whole society. Why? Because if you put in two, you cannot do the calculations. And so in fact, when there were hearings held by the Congress of the USA on called Building a Science of Economics for Our Future, in which they said, economists deceived us. We asked economists, is there something like this financial crisis possible? They said, no, it's not possible. So we need to fix this economic theory. And so there were congressional investigations, and Robert Solow testified that, look, one of the reasons that we failed is because of these DSGE models, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models. These are very complicated models, but they have only one agent. And so the global financial crisis occurred because the mortgages were sold by deception. One person was trying to deceive the other. So if you want to have deception, then you have to have at least two people. One person cannot deceive himself. So obviously, these models cannot catch the global financial crisis. So basically, the economic theory is based on very, very wrong ideas about how the society works and how individuals work. And it gives every individual the capabilities of a super computer, and it only has one individual. There's only one firm. The industry consists of copies of the same firm. Why? Because that's the only case you can do the computations. So basically, the use of the computer allows us to develop a new theory, but it will be a new kind of theory. We can't write down the equations for this theory. We can just say, okay, here's the description of what the society is, and the solution will be given to us by the computer. So the new directions for macroeconomics, in my paper, I have spelled out a large number of different, I have given 9 different areas in which work is being done, which is very interesting. And but in all of them, we have future is uncertain. We have to have context-dependent heterogeneous behavior rules. There are emergent phenomena. We feed something into the computer and we get something very unexpected because the system is very complex. And there is evolutionary economics. This is a very interesting field because it says, okay, what will happen? If suppose you put in a society in which some people are selfish and some people are generous, what will happen? Well, it turns out that in some cases, the selfish behavior will be extinguished and the generosity will take over. In other cases, the generous people will die out and the selfish people will take over. There are different conditions for different kinds of societies. So these are all very important and different ways to study, which are not being taught in conventional economics, but are very important for our future. Again, we should tie these things to the history, the politics, the power structures, institutions, social change. I've mentioned all of these, and all of these things need to be taken into account, and they are mentioned nowhere inside the current textbooks. But finally, the last few slides, basically knowledge is power. So when we try to develop new theories, it will not be in a vacuum. It will be, when you try to say that, okay, economics is wrong, let's do economics in a new way, this is not a neutral thing I am saying. I am attacking the power structures of the world. If I say that let's think about the concepts in different ways, then this is not just, okay, this is not an academic question that we can study in books inside universities. These are actually, this is actually a very dangerous thing for the existing power. If you look at what is happening in the West, if you look at study how neoclassical theory dominates Western universities, and there are a lot of people, there's a whole study called heterodox economics in which a lot of very intelligent people have given very powerful, very excellent, good alternative theories, and they have been completely suppressed. Stephen Keen in England, I have met him personally. He had a macro model based on differential equations, which shows that you can have a society in which you have the great moderation, stable growth rates for a long time, and then you have a sudden collapse, very much like what happened in the global financial crisis. But nobody knows his name, and he was actually pushed out of his university, even though he was one of the few people who was acknowledged to have predicted the global financial crisis. So anybody who is outside the mainstream gets very bad treatment, and they are pushed out, and they cannot, you see, you cannot publish in the good journals if you write something that is against the orthodoxy. So basically, there is so much power to the orthodoxy in the West that the revolution in economic theory that I am talking about cannot be made in the USA. So if somebody is an academic in the USA, forget about it. If you are a student studying in USA or Europe, just be calm. You cannot launch a revolution over there because the power structure is too strongly against it. The current economic system actually colonizes and enslaves the bottom 90%, both in the East and in the West. In the West, the bottom 90% has been suffering. The laborer class has lost their power and has seen a decline in their incomes, real incomes, over the past 30 years. So if we want to launch a revolution, we will not launch it by appealing to the economists. The economists will never agree with us, and our articles will never get published in the top 20 journals if you want to be a revolutionary. So you have to look at who is the audience, and basically our audience is the poor and the powerless. Instead of the North, we have to look at the South. We have to look at the poor countries of the world. They will be very happy to listen, and we have to look at the poor people, the people who are oppressed by the current capitalist system, the people who are losing, not the 60 people who are winning, but the millions and billions who have only $1 a day or less on which to survive. These are the people who will understand that the current system is broken and needs to be fixed. Those people who are making good salaries and are enjoying life, they will say the system is perfect, it's great. I don't want to change the system. And it is absolutely true that with so much poverty and with so very few people having so much, any just system will actually hurt the people who are rich. So, and this includes most of us. So we have to understand Islam teaches us that we have to learn to live simple lives. We have to decide that, okay, I will just live on ekmek paneer so that my brother can eat more. Okay, so there are very many practical considerations which arise if you want to be a revolutionary. At the current stage, there is the orthodoxy, which I have mentioned in the green. This is the new classical theory. Now, there is now a very large number of acceptable deviations, like behavioral economics is acceptable. This is not actually revolutionary in the sense that I am talking about revolution. But if you are going to be in economic school, you're going to study economic theories, you're going to write papers, you want to get published, then you can't say what I am saying. So I always tell my students, some of them get very excited and they go out and say, oh, everything you're doing is wrong to economists. And that's very harmful because for many reasons. So you have to stay calm. There are some ideas which have now become accepted in economics. So evolutionary economics, agent-based models, uh, political economy, all of these are sort of small deviations which are now gradually becoming acceptable. So you can, this is where you can work. You cannot work in the along the lines that I am saying, uh, because that's outside the boundaries. Not so easily anyway. Then you won't get published and you won't get promotions and you will have problems with careers. So you have to be practical in terms of being when you want to be a revolutionary. But for revolutionaries, we must understand that we look for different things. We have to give up on the traditional rewards. The East Asian economist carried out the biggest miracle of the 20th century. All of East Asian economies changed from agricultural economy to advanced industrial economies. This was a whole group of countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, and Thailand. Uh, but not one economist from these countries has received a Nobel Prize. Why? Because they followed models which were in contradiction to what the World Bank. There is a World Bank book called The East Asian Miracle, and it starts with the following sentence that these Eastern economies accomplished a growth miracle, and they did so by violating every single concept of traditional economics. Everything that we say, that you should have free markets, you should not interfere, you should not regulate, you should not subsidize, and they did everything wrong according to our theories, and yet they achieved this miracle. So, uh, so basically, if we want to be revolutionary, we will not get Nobel Prizes, we will not get impact factor publications, but the economic theory that we develop will make an impact on the real world and on the hearts of people. And this is more than enough reward for us. Now, how can we be revolutionary? You see, my message is to people who are early career and who are students, because those people who are late career economists, they have already spent their lives developing these theories and supporting these theories and teaching these theories. They are so deeply embedded in these theories that it is very hard for them to accept the idea that all of this could be wrong, because then it means all of my life has been wasted in studying false theories. It's very hard to accept. It's a very bitter pill to swallow. So the revolutionaries who want to change the structures of knowledge and power must learn to think and act in different ways from the normal. First, remember that people will say, what's the use of this theory? Well, if a theory is against the structures of power, basically the idea that knowledge is power is literally true. The wealthy and the powerful capitalists control the world by these false theories. So looking through these false theories and opposing them by true theories is actually an attack on the realms of power. So if you're going to launch a revolution, you have to think like a revolutionary. You have to have different life goals. You have to strategize. You have to use different methods of working, and you will try to. And as I said, there is the yellow area where there are dissent that you can make. You can say that yes, everything you are saying is right, but here is a problem in with what you are saying, and I will try to fix that problem. So in that way, you can get publications, and sometimes even impact factor publications, and you can get promotions, and you can, as long as you are strategic in your thinking. I often advise PhD students that don't launch a revolution in your PhD thesis. Do something very conventional, very traditional, very standard. Yes, you can put in a little bit of a twist somewhere, but basically aim to get your PhD, because your PhD will be evaluated by everybody who is thinking conventional thoughts. So if you make it too radical, people will say this is wrong. So these are some practical strategies for being revolutionary. And in addition, you need a lot of knowledge. You need to study a lot of things. The traditional economist will study his macro, micro in the textbook, but I am asking the revolutionaries to study not just those theories, but why they are wrong and how to replace them. So you have to study 3 times. You have to study the original theory, then you have to study why this is wrong, then you have to study what is the replacement. So this is a lot of work, and I have done a lot of this work. I have 2 blogs. One is Islamic Worldview, and the other is WA Pedagogy. One of these are a lot of posts discussing a lot of different aspects of the ideas that I have discussed right now. And all of these posts, they contain links to articles and other posts. And so if you study these, you will understand the ideas that I'm developing in a deeper way. And there is a huge amount of research that needs to be done. You see, once you start thinking along these lines, then every question becomes new. Take the simplest possible question, and you can write research on it. How is the how does the industry price goods? Now, the economic theory says that price equals marginal cost. This is completely bogus and false and wrong. So then the question is, what is the price? Well, there are good theories out there. You have to learn them. Similarly, if I say, okay, supply and demand is wrong, then you say that, okay, so then how does the world work? So there are alternatives. If you say inflation is caused by money, this is all wrong. Then what does cause inflation? So at every level, in every question, there are new questions and new ways of thinking and new answers we can bring. So the whole world is open for a knowledge revolution. Okay, I think this is my last slide, and I will quit. Yes, here. Okay, so I will stop sharing here and stop.
Thank you very much, sir, for your views. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Muhibbullah.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Welcome. I'm glad that you are here, and thank you for the very nice lecture. Professor, I want to ask you, as you just mentioned, we studied in the Islamic economics the concept of Islamization of knowledge. And some of the professor, for example, Professor Alatas, who described a very lengthy, good chart for it. For example, first study the conventional economics, their society, their behavior, and the flaws in their economic system. And then we come up with a model for it. So don't you think it's a very lengthy process, like very long time, taking 30 or 40 years, something like that?
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, a lot of work has already been done. So yes, It is a process that will take 30, 40 years maybe, but we are thinking about changing the world. So we can't do it in one day. Rome was not built in one day. So, and as I said, it is not the outcome that matters, it is the process. If you are part of the struggle for the truth, that is all that matters. Whether it will take 100 years or whether it takes 200 years, it doesn't matter. As long as I am part of the process for the change for the good, then this is fine. And it can be speeded up, and there is a lot of good work available. So if you read my blogs, for example, I will they summarize, and then they give you pointers to where the literature is, where you can do work. And there's a lot of good work that you can do right now, today. Yes, if you say that, okay, I want to achieve the results, I want to see the new society built on Islamic foundations, well, yes, that might take a long time. It might even never happen, because Allah Ta'ala, when He was creating this world, He said that there will be fitna and fasad. The angel said that there will be fitna and fasad. So why are you doing this? So Allah Ta'ala said that I know something you do not know. So this world is not designed to be heaven. It is designed for the struggle for paradise, the struggle for the good. The outcome are not guaranteed to us. We can all struggle for the good, and we can all fail. We can all die without achieving success. This doesn't matter as long as we struggle to achieve the good. That is success in itself, and that can be achieved today and tomorrow. We don't have to wait 10 years. So as long as you think in the terms of the process and not in terms of the outcome, you can achieve success today.
Prof, I have just one another small question. I do agree, like we as a Muslim believe that there is no other reality that cannot be seen or observed. This is our belief, our aqidah. And we claim that our system, Islam, is the best system. But we still, for example, if we take the example of Islamic economics, we couldn't convince them. We cannot convince the West. Another example is like,
Yes, I already said that we will never convince the West. The issue is to
and
abandon trying to convince the West.
and
Our
another
message is for the poor and the oppressed, not for the powerful and the rich.
example is that, for example, during the Ottomans, it was us Muslim who changed our civil law from Majalla, which is collection of ahadith, to the French law and Britain law. And they said, like, if you claim your Islam is the best system, you don't even have a family law, you are copying from us. So is it not our own blame?
Yes, for sure. There is a reason for this. And yes, we have actually a much better system of law. Their own system of law was copied from the Islamic modern century and the 16th century, and the books of law of in Arabic were taught for one whole century in the